Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education that will give you a marketable skill set for an ever-changing world. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, October 17th, and welcome to episode number 90. Do colleges know where else your child applies to? In this week's news, the judge has issued a verdict in Harvard's affirmative action case. And we're in chapter 90 of 171 answers. And Mark tells us if colleges have access to know where else your child is applying. And it's time this week for our bonus content. And Mark is walking us through some of the changes in in this year's Common Application. And Mark kicks off his interview with Mr. Peter Van Buskirk. He's the founder of Best College Fit and former VP of Enrollment at Franklin & Marshall. In understanding how colleges act as businesses in ways that are not in your best interest, part 1.
And friends, Anika and I just want to thank all of you, each and every one of you that has told anybody about our podcast, whether it's a friend, a relative, your mama, your sister, your brother, your high school counselor, or anyone else about our podcast. We are growing, and it is because of you, and we just want to thank you. Next up, it is our admissions tip of the week. When you are filling out the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, or the profile, which some selective schools require you to do, it's going to constantly say you, and the you is the student. However, my advice to you is this. The best way to fill out both of these financial forms is with the student and the parent. That's the ideal. If you can't fill it out with the student and the parent, maybe you're both in different locations, or you as a parent do not want your student to see how much money you make, which is understandable, right? Especially if you're like Anika and you're hauling in the big bucks. Then my second advice is parent only. My last advice is do not let the student complete either one of these forms by themselves. The FAFSA has at least 108 questions. The profile has at least 241 questions. And it is mostly questions about parent income and assets, things on your tax returns, and they can make a mistake that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Anika, how have you done this?
Well, can I just say that we have a close friend who I learned he actually did the FAFSA by himself, a student. I was like, wait, what? So,
no,
yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of students who do it by themselves, but it's just too big of a risk to take.
Right. I mean, he did well, but it was still shocking. I didn't think kids had it in them to even go for it. So, yeah.
No, a lot of kids do it, but I asked you, obviously you've done this before.
No.
$75,000 for Davidson.
We absolutely do it with the kid. We did it with Jalen. We're going to do it with Janaea. And yes, that it is total partnership.
Well, you're better than me, Anika, because I've done this mostly by myself most of the time, even that's not ideal. But the ideal is the kid and the parent together. First choice, you get the gold award. I would get the silver, second best option, parent only. And you get an F if you let your child do this by yourself. But it's tricky because it says you as if they expect the child only to do it. It is crazy, especially for the profile. Just have to get it out there. You want to be paying tens of thousands of dollars more, go ahead and let your child. I'm not saying your child's not bright, but don't be trusting them that much with the family finances on the line. That's all I'm saying. Admissions vernacular. The word today is stealth. Stealth. I was talking to a friend of mine. We just left the college admission side to go to the other side of the desk, as we say. Joining me on this side, sending kids, no longer receiving kids. We were talking about a particular kid, and he was like, Mark, do you know that kid was stealth and they got in? What is it? What do you think that means, Anika?
That's a tricky one.
Wait, you said, do you know he was stealth when he got in? Like, I don't know. Was he something different than what you expected, or what's going on?
So a stealth applicant is somebody who's not even in your database at all. And then the application shows up, and literally they could have dropped out of Mars and it would have been like, okay, like there's no record of this kid at all. Like you weren't sending them mail. They never visited. You never met them on the road. They never requested information. They weren't in any of your searches, and they just, bang, they showed up as an applicant. And it's called a stealth applicant. And they're actually, believe it or not, between 35 to 50% of applicants at some schools, stealth applicants.
Really?
Yeah, but it's harder to get in as a stealth applicant. So anyway, that's our word, stealth. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article. Oh, our breaking news this week. So I'm sure there are like several articles on this, but the one we're highlighting here is Judge upholds Harvard's admissions policies, and it's found in Inside Higher Ed, written by Mr. Scott Jaschik. We've had a few articles from him before. So federal judge Miss Allison Burroughs, she's of the U.S. District Court in Massachusetts, and she ruled that Harvard's approach to affirmative action does not discriminate against Asian Americans. So Judge Burroughs, she did acknowledge that Harvard's admissions approach isn't perfect, but she's saying that it's not so imperfect that it needs to be torn to pieces. And then in her ruling, she wrote that diversity at Harvard in part does rely on race-conscious admissions. And so the article went on to, list all the responses from the people, including the people who filed the complaint, the group. What's the guy's name? Ed. I can't remember his whole name.
Ed Bloom.
Yeah. So the students at Harvard who supported the ruling, they sent out a statement. And part of the statement, Mark, that struck me most was that what they say is that the court stopped a blatant attack on diversity at Harvard and at colleges across the country. So, Mark, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm thinking that you're on the cheering side of the room. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, me and 98% of people in college admissions, because, and I was thinking about this. I'm going to tell one of my crazy stories where I'm going off on a rabbit trail, but I'm on. Like, be patient with me. I think I'll bring the plane back around and land it. So, Anika, I'm a night person, right? You know that. So this is crazy, but I was up working at 1:30 in the morning last night, and I just got an urge. I said, I have not been outside all day. I got to get outside. And I've converted Anitra into being a night person, even though she's in denial. So she's still up. So I was like, what do you need from the store? So I drove, and the first store I went to was closed. Next one was closed. I went to this 24-hour Walmart in Peachtree City. And I was just thinking when I was driving, what is it that people don't understand about college admissions? What's the biggest thing they don't understand? I was just driving and thinking. And the thing that popped into my mind that people don't understand about college admissions is that people think, this is particularly at, highly selective schools, but people think of college admissions as a meritocracy. They think of it as an individual process. In other words, my GPA needs to be higher than your GPA, and my AP scores need to be higher than your AP scores, and my SAT subject tests and my extracurriculars and my essay. And they're surprised. And they say it every year to me. They're like, you're not going to believe this, Mark. This kid was ranked 23rd in their class, and they got in, and the valedictorian and the salutatorian both didn't get in. That's nuts. That's messed up. So this is the kind of stuff I consistently hear all the time. And what people don't understand is that the best way to think of a school assembling a class is to think of an orchestra, right? So an orchestra is in the business of making the best music, right? And you could be a violinist and you could be amazing. But if we already have enough violinists and we need a flutist or a bassoonist, then that's the instrument we're going to go for, because that's going to make our team better. That's going to make the better music. And the same is true, Alex, I'm a non-music person, so I just threw that out because you're artsy over there. I'm more of a sports person. I can say the same thing for sports, right? I'm trying to have the best team, and you're the most incredible quarterback, but I already have 4 quarterbacks. I need some people that can block and tackle, and need some defensive backs, and I need a kicker. And that's what makes for the best team, the best orchestra, the best team, and that's what makes for the best school, is people that have different gifts. And so that's the piece that people don't understand. And that's really what came out in this case. And everybody who does the work understands that diversity adds strength to your school. And the other thing that they understand, people that do the work, is the students we're talking about admitting they're phenomenal students who are exceptionally strong academically. So we're not talking about people who can't do the work. We're talking about exceptional students who can do the work. But what the Harvard case brought out that I really, really liked is that who's to say that test scores are the best criteria to evaluate who gets in? So the argument, in this case is, look, kids with better test scores are not getting in. And they showed the data. And the data actually showed that if they just went off test scores, then Harvard would be predominantly Asian. Whites would actually be a minority if they only went with test scores. And what this case showed, I'm going to read this from the closing arguments because I thought this was what was most powerful. It says, in its closing arguments, Harvard said that this analysis looks bad only because of a false assumption that the key factors in admission should always be academic. It says this might be true at a college where the applicants included many who could not do the work to succeed, the university argued. But at Harvard, the vast majority of applicants could not only exceed, but they could thrive here with high school backgrounds that would earn them admission at the vast majority of colleges and universities. In this environment, it's actually non-academic factors that may be decisive. And so I really appreciate that because to me, building a class is more akin, like if you have a company and you're trying to hire people for your company, you're really looking at what individual talents do you bring in? How do you fit in with the group? Will you make our entire company stronger? You're not just going to say, okay, who has a higher test score? And to have the affirmation that, look, we're talking about minute differences, right? We're talking about a kid, okay, maybe you take a kid with the 1530 SAT over a kid with the 1600, but the kid with the 1530 is extraordinary in some other aspect of leadership. And their extracurriculars and their comments from the teachers are like effusive. And what Harvard is saying is, if that's a key person who's also bringing a perspective because of their life experiences to our school and to our community that is going to challenge everybody around us to think differently, that's going to prepare people around us for the real world they're going out into, then that's somebody who is of immense value and can strengthen our school. You are the bassoonist. You are the flutist. You are the cellist. You are the piccolo player that helps the orchestra make better music. And that got upheld in this case. And I think that that's really, really important because the whole belief that there's an inappropriate role for race in the college admission process stems from the fact that it should strictly be things like the numbers that should determine who has quality. And that's just not how you build a good team. And it's not how you build a good organization. It's not that you ignore numbers. It's just that they're not the be all and end all. And when somebody else clearly has the numbers to indicate that they can thrive, then it's the other factors, that should come into play. So, and I feel like I've talked for a while. What are you thinking?
And all that was great. And I was just going to say, because don't we have to now, the way you spelled that out, like, I don't feel like we all had to go through a trial to realize that. Like, that's kind of a no-brainer, the way you made that sound. Basically, it makes sense. I mean, why would they lose that case? But don't we then have to go back to the point of the initial intent of this person, Edward Bloom? Again, I feel like I'm saying his name on purpose.
No, you said it right.
And because the thing that the judge pointed out, she said he doesn't have, part of the problem is that there is no victim associated with this,
correct,
with their case. Like, there was no one that they could put on the stand and say, I was affected AYZ because of AYZ. So can't we just go back to the ultimate motive behind this person? And it just wasn't strictly legit, I feel like.
Well, yeah, if you study Bloom, he's been a crusader forever, right? He's considered the most instrumental person behind the somewhat dismantlement of the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby decision that occurred in Alabama.
Right.
So he's got an agenda, and it's been very clear, and it goes from cause to cause to cause. But look, powerful people are going to try to do different things to do anything they can to. I mean, look, we saw what happened with the side door hustle, what I call it, right? Varsity Blues, the William Singer debacle. Powerful people spend a lot of money to get what they want. And there will always be a case. And we should say a couple of things about this, Anika. This is breaking news because a lot of people didn't necessarily know how this initial ruling would go down. A lot of people thought they may lose the case.
Why, though? How could you lose that? I don't see how you... Help us with how they could have, like, where were the vulnerabilities in all of this?
Yeah, so the vulnerabilities are that discrimination is occurring against somebody else. Like you're taking one person over somebody else. And in this case, it turns out that Asian students as a whole, in general, got a lower personal rating in Harvard's rating system. And so the question is there some implicit bias going on that is adversely impacting how people see Asian Americans? And so that's why the case was brought against discrimination. And the ruling was that, and obviously Asian Americans are 25% of Harvard. They're a quarter of the population when they're about 4 times more represented at Harvard than they are in the population at whole. So that was one thing I think that strengthened Harvard's case was that, look, it's not like you can even say that, okay, Asians are about 6% and we're admitting 6%. Like, no, we're 1/4 of our student body is Asian. But the case they were bringing was, is there discrimination in how Asians are seen and how they're getting rated when it comes to the personal rating? So the academic rating, which is primarily, although not exclusively numbers driven, was very, very high. Like the evidence showed that Harvard will be mostly Asian if we just do this just off of the numbers. But then when they came back and said there are other factors that weigh in, and if other people are bringing other traits to the table, one of which is a diverse perspective that the campus lacks, then that's something of value. And I'm not saying there's not any truth to the fact that there is subtle implicit biases, just like there are on gender, race, social class, like all those things do happen. But I think the motives that you brought up were very significant. Another thing that's important to bring out, Anika, is that this is not going away. I mean, this has been going on since Bakke in 78 now, 42 years of, did I do that right? 41 years. 41 years of bringing these kinds of cases. And they're going to continue to be cases like this. Like this is probably going to the Supreme Court. And it will be the 6th time the Supreme Court will have taken up race in college admissions since 1978. So this is literally not going away. I mean, you have the major landmark cases, Bakke in 78, Gratz versus Bollinger, 2003 with the University of Michigan. They had unconstitutionally used their undergraduate admission system and given students of color a point-based system. And that was ruled, unconstitutional. Then you had another ruling in Grutter versus Bollinger again that year. You had Fisher versus Texas in 2013. And then once again, another round of Fisher versus Texas in 2016. So this isn't going away. Even right now in the courts, there's another case challenging the system the University of North Carolina is using. So look, there is a balance there, right? Like I would be the first to admit that you could create a system that would be unjust. So it's about striking the right balance in terms of, is it in the best interest of the institution? And is it fair and equitable? But what a school is always going to come down on is we want to educate our students in the absolute best and most effective way. That's what we're committed to. And for you to come in and tell us how to do our job when, and that's going to create umbrage. And especially when there's such widespread support. All of academia. Now, I was at Harvard, as you know, for 6 days, Anika. And when I was there, there was so much buzz about this case. I mean, even to the point where I wanted to get William Fitzsimmons on the podcast as a guest. He's been Dean of Admissions at Harvard for he's been there for 47 years. And he's like, Mark, I'm not doing any media until this case is done. And that's not just this ruling because it's going to be appealed. Did you see that in the article?
Right.
Like this would be appealed.
Yeah, he made that clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll probably, if they lose the appeal, it will probably, they'll go to the Supreme Court.
Just keep
so
going.
This is not done, but this is round 1. And stay tuned because there's stuff in the works against Yale. There's stuff in the works against North Carolina that's moving itself. And with the current administration gaslighting and throwing their support behind this stuff, who knows kind of and where things will be. But what I can tell you is that throughout all of academia, it is so rare to find someone who doesn't believe that, one, you can find incredibly talented, diverse applicants who can come in and excel in your program. 2, they add a tremendous amount to the community and they make your school stronger, just like it makes the orchestra play better music. It makes the football team win better when you have talent in different positions. That's a strong belief. And when I was at Harvard, there was a lot of talk. They said, Mark, and one time Fitzsimmons said to me, Mark, we have to win this case. We cannot lose this case. There's so much in college in general that is writing on this. And there was a lot of talk. It wasn't just Harvard that was there. There were 25 or 30 leaders from major institutions, and there was a lot of buzz. So a lot of people, at least for now, are breathing a sigh of relief.
Well, good luck, Harvard. Congratulations for now. But as you know, it's going to be some more coming soon.
Yeah. And I mean, look at what's happened at Michigan and look at what's happened at California and look at what happened at Texas. These are states that implemented their own statewide ban on using race at all in the college admission process. And when I talk to all those institutions, they feel like their institutions are weaker as a result of it. But they've made it state law. So there's many states that, I just listed a few of the major ones. So we have a sample size out here of states that have taken the opposite decision and passed statewide decrees. And I can tell you, when I talk to every one of those institutions, they all feel like they're doing an inferior job educating their students because they're not exposing their students to wide swaths of the American population. And therefore, they're not preparing them for the world they're going out into, and they're not necessarily developing their understanding and their critical thinking skills. All of that happens. When you interact with people who think differently than you do, and it's not just race, it's social class, it's culture, it's ideology, it's religion, it's international perspectives. All of that is what makes you a better critical thinker and a person who understands the world and understands cultures better. So I support this decision. And I would say 97, 98% of those in academia do as well. And one thing that made me really happy in this article was to see the students sort of out celebrating at Harvard about the decision, And that's the students saying, I personally know that I benefit because I'm around talented, diverse people that are not all like me. Anyway, let's move on because I have a feeling we'll be coming back here again if the Supreme Court, rules on it in a few years.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, we are in chapter 90 of my book, which corresponds with our episode titles. For our first-time listeners, I wrote a book called 171 Answers. And what I did was I take the most frequently asked questions I'm asked as a college admissions coach, and I just turned each question into a chapter. So it's a reference book. And we use the book titles as our episode titles, even if sometimes it's the shortest portion of our 4-part podcast. And so we're in week 90 this week. And the question is, do colleges know where else I applied? What'd you learn, Anika?
Well, I learned that you tell us off the rip that nope, they don't know unless you tell them. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that the most important takeaway for me was that it's actually unethical for schools to even ask you or your child or your family where else they're applying to. So that's one key thing to know. What I did find interesting is where you cited where at one time schools could see on the FAFSA application how a student ranked their schools at one time. So they could see essentially what other schools they were applying to. But that was disabled in 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, so let me say a little bit more about that. That's important. So when you complete the FAFSA, you may remember this, Anika, you can list up to 10 schools. You get what's called a SAR, a student aid report, and institutions get what's called an ISAR, which is basically an institutional version of the SAR. So when schools would receive this ISAR with all your data on it, it would list the 10 schools, or even 6, whatever. It doesn't have to be 10, right? It could be 3. However many schools you applied, it was listing those schools. But this is the key thing. It's not just that it was listing it. It was listing it in the order that you wrote it down. And schools were seeing that as an indication of lack of demonstrated interest. So what they were saying is, you know what? You listed us number 9 on your FAFSA. That indicates to us that we're not in the forefront of your mind. We're in the back of your mind. And therefore, they were using that. Not all of them, but enough of them were using that to inform. Remember, I always say, Anika, even schools that don't say they use demonstrated interest, there's some component of demonstrated interest that all selective schools use. Let's put it this way. There are very, very few schools that don't have some component of demonstrated interest. Whether it's something as simple as you were deferred or you're waitlisted, and do you fill out the reaffirmation form indicating, yes, I want to continue my interest with you. Even that is a form of demonstrated interest, let alone early decision or single choice early action, all things that are used to indicate whether or not you like the school more than others, or at least where they stand. So schools were actually using this. They were saying, we're number 7. Guess what? We're probably not going to get you. So we'll focus on people that have us ranked number 1 or 2. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
And what happened was they were busted because some schools came out and admitted they were doing this. So as of 2016, that practice was no longer allowed and schools no longer even see that rating. So, yeah. But keep in mind, that would only be for applicants who free application for federal student aid. That would be it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, here's another thing. Let's say you go on and you think you're only applying to 3 schools. You fill out the FAFSA. Okay, so they send the ISR off to those 3 schools. If you can go in and edit your FAFSA, just like you can apply to more than 10 schools for financial aid, right? You can 10 at one time, but then you can go in and edit it and add more. And if you did that, then not everybody would get the additional schools that you did. So that only applied when people put them all on one sheet, but they got busted and schools admitted, yeah, we're kind of using that. And some schools even had research, Anika, that showed that if somebody lists us number 1, our chance of yielding that student, remember, once again, yield is the percentage of students that accept your offer.
Mm-hmm.
You put 100 offers out there. Do you get 90 back or do you get 9 back? Right? And if you get 9 out of 100 back, that's a 9% yield. You get 90, that's a 90% yield. And so there was research that if people listed you number 1, you had a much better chance of yielding them, which makes sense, right? Because in other words, if you're really thinking about whatever the school is, UCLA, if they're on your mind, they're on your mind, you're on their mind, then you're probably going to put them down number 1.
All right.
So that was happening, and that policy got abrogated with the new rules that came out. You were going to say something, though.
Well, no, I was just going to say that now then in comes the clearinghouse report.
Correct.
Which you made clear that it's pretty much after the admissions decisions, but that's still a way for schools to see.
So let's tell people what that is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm defining it or not, but to me, it seems like a report where the schools, after admissions decisions come out,
yes,
schools can see where students actually matriculated to that they accepted. So if I accepted you, but you didn't come to me, I can see where you actually went.
Correct. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. One of the searches any college can do is through the National Student Clearinghouse, what is known as the Former Prospective Student Query. This is one of the student tracker search options through the National Student Clearinghouse, and it allows each college to search former applicants who did not enroll at their college. And if they are enrolled somewhere else, the admissions counselor can find out where they are currently enrolled.
Oh, okay. That's just what's there. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a way for people to find out after the fact, but that's just more of a curiosity thing, right? Like we're talking about when you're in the process.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the process of applying, do they know where else you applied to? So here's my question for you. Did you think they knew or did you think they didn't know, Anika, going into this?
I did. I thought they did know.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't see anything wrong with it. I just thought that they... I just figured they had access to the information.
Yeah. And did you have any idea how they had access?
I mean, I assume everything's so online and database oriented. I just figured they have access to all these portals to this stuff.
Yeah, because one of the biggest myths that's out there is that the Common App lets other colleges know, because obviously the Common App, has everything on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the myths out there, is that the Common App is letting all the competitors know where else you applied. That's like the most common myth I hear, because it can see it, and then it does that. It lets everybody know, okay, look, these are all the schools that somebody applied to. And so what you don't want to do is tell schools where else you applied. It's usually not in your best interest to do that. Why do you think I would say that? So why do you think I would say it's not in your best interest to say that?
Well, it's interesting. I was just about to bring up the story that you included in this chapter where the kid is just having like casual conversation with the admissions officer. And he's like, well, I love Williams College and I love y'all, but guess what? I love this other school even more, by the way. And we're just talking, but it just so happened that the kid got denied from the school that he was talking to. So are you saying, in fact, that does matter? Like, don't utter a word. I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, let me read the story so our listeners can follow. So in my book, for those of you, most of you don't have it, some do. At the end of every one of my chapters, I tell a true story. I do change the name sometimes unless somebody gave me permission to use their actual name. But this is a true story. And so this is what I say in my book. I say, Raymond was perplexed when a letter arrived in the mail from Williams College and he was denied. He had been the number one ranked student at his very large public school in the 9th and the 10th grade before he transferred to Westtown for 11th. I was counseling Ray through the situation. And just by the way, just so you know, this is one of the times when the name was changed. I didn't get permission, so this is a fictitious name, but the story's true. I was counseling Ray through the situation when he said to me, do you think me not getting into Williams might have to do with the casual conversation I had with the Williams rep? And I told him I really like Williams, and the only school that I like more than Williams is Dartmouth. And then I said, Ray was very smart, but this was very dumb, Ray. No one wants to be anybody's backup.
Oh, Ray.
So anyway, that's a true story. Obviously, great kid. Love the kid. He was an awesome kid. Just didn't make a smart move there. What were you thinking? Yeah, I think you had a question though, Anika.
Well, no, I mean, that's a thing. Like, casual conversations are a thing, and you just have to be mindful of that. And it just fascinates me how these schools, I mean, all of these past few weeks, it just gets more systematic, more scientific, how they go about doing these admissions, and a conversation is a part of that. So it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy, but a reality, but still crazy.
Now, I'm going to be honest. Like, when I did admissions, I loved knowing where else somebody was applying. It told me it told me so much about them. Some of the things it tells me, one, what my probability of yielding is. And you may say, well, how does it do that? Well, I know the track record of how we do against different schools. So if you throw out a bunch of names, and if I can look at an applicant and I know this is a competitive applicant, they're likely to be admitted.
Mark, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, because this is the other thought process that I had that I totally forgot about.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it was a good thing to tell schools where you were going, because it made them feel like, if I'm looking at another great school, then they should feel like they're in competition, so they should be willing to get me more or get my student. Does that make sense? I
see how you could feel that way, but they're going to do their own independent evaluation of you and how desirable you are.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, I'm just saying that I thought that way. I thought for a long time that it made sense for you to tell what the other schools you were applying to, because you want them to know that you're going after other high quality schools to make you look better.
Yeah, people don't need that. There is some truth to what you're saying. It's true that if I hear all the names of a selective schools, I will likely use that as an indication that this is a high achieving and competitive applicant. So in a sense, you could say that somewhat vets them. However, there's a downside. In my opinion, it isn't worth it for the student. It helps the admissions counselor, and it's a tad risky for the student. It's not major, but the risk reward isn't there. Personally, I was always extremely curious where other students were applying, but quite frankly, it was just none of my business. I think another thing that's very revealing when you learn about the other schools is it's also an indication of whether or not they get who you are. So you kind of know who the other schools, like, out there that are similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to use boarding school as an example. I did college admissions back in 1991, but I'll use a boarding school example because it's more recent. So school that's most like Westtown is where your daughter is at, Anika, Janaea.
Mm-hmm.
So Westtown and George are the two nationally well-known Quaker boarding schools in the country, like the wealthiest, $100 million endowments, largest, all that stuff. They're the big boys. And so we would overlap with them a lot, as we would with other schools that were fairly close by, like the Petty School, St. Andrews, a little bit with Hill, quite a bit with Hill, actually, because Hill was like 40 minutes away, the Hill School. So I would expect that, okay? But if I'm hearing overlap with a school that's completely different and not like us at all, that kind of indicates to me a little bit as to how much research this applicant has done. Like, why are you looking at someplace that's so completely different than who we are? That raises questions how much research you've put into building your list, which doesn't bode well from you. So the point is, there's all kinds of extrapolations that an admission officer can make if they know who the list is. Even sometimes, like, if I heard all kinds of schools that were non-selective at all, and I heard that before I knew anything about the student academically, I might wonder, is this like kind of a weaker student because all the schools they're looking at are non-selective. And so maybe this is a weaker applicant. So the point is, you don't really want to allow an admissions officer to begin to be drawing off of their experience with what they know about those other schools and factoring that into their first impression of you. So it's just, there's really no reason for you to do that. But I see students do it all the time. They do it casually. They're not even really realizing they're doing it.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, Mark, it's time. This week's question segment turns into our bonus content segment.
Bonus.
And we are going through changes, not just changes, but recent changes in this year's Common Application. Lots of them, Mark. A few of them. Let us know. What are the biggies this year?
Well, let me just take a step and give a little bit of a background. So the Common App is a member organization, and the members are the colleges. And I personally find it's a very responsive organization to the colleges. So they listen to their members and they make changes based on feedback from their members. And then when the coalition, and we're talking a little bit about the coalition next week, when the Coalition for College came around, it's been about 4 years now. The first time the Common App's not really the bully on the block, the monopoly. And that grew out of the problems that the Common App had in 2014 when they rolled out their fourth version, what we just called CA4. There were a lot of technical problems, and people said, oh my goodness, we're too dependent on this Common App. Let's have a competitor. So then the coalition came up. And the coalition did a lot. I don't want to talk too much about the coalition. We're talking about it next week. But I'll just say this. Some of the things the coalition was really good at, it forced the Common App to beef its game up and to respond, and it did.
Okay.
And so then they listened even more attentively and made some changes. So let's talk about some of them. So one of them, and this might seem trite, it may seem trivial, but it's impactful. The Common App has a whole new look. They did a lot of research about what would appeal to millennials when it comes to style. And they got rid of that red kind of gray color scheme. They went to a blue-green color scheme. They did a total style makeover. And I'll tell you, Anika, I cannot tell you how many students I'm working with are like, oh my goodness, I love this new look on my screen.
Really?
I mean, the feedback has been effusive because what I do with just the whole layout and the look. I mean, design matters, Anika. If you take a website and you do a whole new, complete style maker of a website, it evokes a certain emotional response, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And what happened is when I'm working with my students, I have them start the Common App even in the sophomore year and certainly the junior year because they can just roll it over. So they were used to the old look and then bang, the new look popped out August 1st and they were like jumping for joy. So that's the first thing is the new refreshed look. And it's not just students, actually. I've heard from all my colleagues, counselors, everybody likes the new look. So that's the first thing. Another thing. When you're in your dashboard now of the Common App, and when you want to add a school to your My Colleges section that you want to add, so what happens is, for people who are not familiar with this, in the Common App, you have a college search tool, and you start to put the name in of the school. In the past, you had to type sort of the whole name out. And now as soon as you start typing, like let's say you want to put in Lewis and Clark, a really good school in Portland. Now, as soon as you type in, LEWI, like, how it like auto populates. And so that's just a nice little convenient feature. And it makes it a lot easier to enter schools into your dashboard. Another thing that's really, really cool, and I really like this feature a lot. So let's stick with Lewis and Clark. So let's say I'm interested in Lewis and Clark and I'm a student. So I go to college search, Lewis, let's say I type LEWI, bang, pops up Lewis and Clark. Add it to my dashboard. Okay, now I go into Lewis and Clark, into the actual application. Okay, and I start answering the questions for Lewis and Clark. How I want to apply is my application method. And it gives me choices. Like for Lewis and Clark, you have some options. You have regular admissions. They have both early action and ED and EA. So let's just say I select EA and I click it. Yeah, I want to do EA. So now an EA for Lewis and Clark is a November 1st deadline. So when I go back to my dashboard now, it will actually give you a countdown of how many days are left until it has to be submitted.
Wow.
So it's really cool. So it'll be like, 26 days and then, a few more, 22 days. So I think that's just kind of a kick in the pants for kids to get on with meeting deadlines. Did that make sense or was that confusing?
No, that was perfect sense.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I really like, which is really cool. Another thing that I really love is they do have enhanced search features. So once again, when you're back in the college search, I actually was fooling around trying some different things. If you just put in the word Washington, St. Louis under college search, all of a sudden you'll have a list of every single college that either has the name Washington in it, the name St. Louis in it, or that's in the city or the state of Washington or the city of Washington or the city of St. Louis. They're all in front of you. So you can search a lot easier right now when you're doing your college search.
Does that give kids ideas? Yeah,
it can. It really can. It really can. It can give some ideas. And so that's really cool. And another thing that I like is there's a new Common App question. And I really like this question. And I don't want to get too much into this because we're going to be talking about this later. We talked about Harvard initiative, Making Caring Common. And we talked about that about almost a year and a half ago. And there's a new one that's come out called Making Caring Common Part 2. And I want to talk about that at some point on the podcast. But in response to that initiative, Making Caring Common, which is basically a new way of doing college admissions, they have a new question on the Common App. And it's a supplemental question. And this is the question. It says, who in your life is depending on you? And what are they depending on you for? Is that a good question? I like it.
I think so. Yeah.
It's deep. So it's an optional question, but it's a new question. And several schools are using that question. For example, for Harvey Mudd, they make this one of their 4 choices. And here's what they say. Actually, this is a description for really anybody that chooses this question. It says this: dependence takes many forms and it's happening in your daily life. Your story can be as obvious as the kids you babysit or the people experiencing homelessness you feed at a shelter. But it can also be less cut and dry. Remember, your friends depend on you for compassion and inspiration. Your siblings depend on you to set an example or to cheer them on in their endeavors. One way to think about this is to ask yourself, who would be disappointed if I didn't show up? Walk yourself through your day, your week, and your past year, and take note of who is it that counts on you. You might surprise yourself with how integral you are in the lives of those around you. In telling this story, show admissions that you don't take your responsibilities lightly and that you appreciate the interconnectedness of your community, whatever that may be. If you're inspired by helping others and have a unique relationship that's worth sharing, this prompt may be for you. So now the schools that use the prompt use it differently. So for Harvey Mudd, you have 4 choices, and this is one of the 4. For Barnard, it's a required question. For Harvey Mudd and Barnard, they say it's a 100 to a 250 word response. Now, USC, it's a prompt they use, but they give you 3 choices. So it's one of 3. You don't have to do it. But at USC, it's between 1 to 500 words. So for different schools, it may be required. It may be optional. The word length may vary, but it's a new supplemental question that a lot of schools are doing in response to the Making Caring Common initiative that we'll be talking about more in future episodes. Any questions so far? Or should I keep going, Anika?
No, I think that's good. I think I'm going to actually do that prompt for myself. It's a little life reminder.
You trying to go back to school with the 18-year-olds?
I just need to remember my purpose in life. I need to refresh.
You're going to use it, Teresa. You know what? You think I'm into college admissions. I'm not going back and answering prompts on the Common App. That's like hardcore on steroids.
Just that one. No other ones. Just that
Well, you know what? That would be, forget the Common App. That's all about life, right? That's like a life thing. Yeah,
exactly.
That's really your way of saying it's a really good question without saying it, right?
You're right. It's an excellent question. Yes, you're correct.
So here's one that you'll like because you're a big Michelle Obama fan, you know? And so Michelle Obama started an initiative called Reach Higher, and it was all about providing college access to underserved kids. And it really, really grew, and it took off. And so what happened was basically the Common App merged with Reach Higher. Yeah. And so Reach Higher brings their expertise in policy and government relations and philanthropy and in social media and how to target millennials. And the Common App brings all of the resources involved in the Common App so that more kids have college access. So kind of really exciting, the partnership with Reach Higher. Basically, I mean, the Common App really engulfed is not the right word because that sounds pejorative, but they merged and, they merged under the Common App banner. So that's really cool. Another change this year is, and I think we might have talked about this before one time. I'm not sure. You can tell me if we did. Yes, we did. Remember how I said, Anika, that when you hear the word extracurriculars, it tends to give off a connotation of what are you doing at school outside of school? Do you remember that?
Right. I do. Yeah.
But that's not actually what colleges want. Colleges want to know what do you do with your free time, period, when you're not in school. So that includes things like whether or not you do chores at home, and whether or not you have babysitting responsibilities or you clean the dishes or you take care of a brother that's, or a sibling, that's, got Down syndrome or something, I mean, that's an extreme, but they want to know about that. And so they've rephrased the question about activities to indicate that family responsibilities and community engagement, they count. It's about how you spend your time outside of the class. It's not about what are you doing at school. So that's kind of a big one, really, because, the activity section is important. And for a long time, certain colleges have been saying, oh, we want to know that. But the way the question was worded, it didn't reinforce that. So that's a big change. And then another thing that I would say is 70 additional, very diverse colleges came on the Common App this year, 70 to 80. That's a lot in every region of the country. So in New England, you had, I'll just give you a couple examples. You had Landmark in Vermont. In the Mid-Atlantic, you have schools like, the CUNYs really came on. That's a big deal. The City of New York schools like Hunter College, College of Staten Island, Brooklyn College, Baruch, they all came on. Pennsylvania, you have Duquesne and Chestnut Hill, and Gwinnett Mercy, Kutztown, Messiah. It was a big year for Pennsylvania and other schools as well. Pennsylvania College of Technology. In the Midwest, Iowa State, that's a really big university that came on. Central Michigan, University of Michigan at Dearborn, and quite a few others. University of North Dakota. The Common App was exuberant to get North Dakota to join because the Common App previously had 49 states. And getting North Dakota means they can now say we are in all 50 states. And then probably the biggest region that made the biggest splash was in the South, because some really well-known schools that have large applicant pools joined the Common App this year, including the University of Arkansas, which is the flagship for the state. Elon, we did a feature on them on 84 and our college spotlight. Florida Atlantic, which is a big school. This is a school that my youngest daughter actually considered. Florida Gulf University. And then here's a big one, University of Florida. Not only is that the big boy on the block, the flagship for Florida, but a nationally renowned school. They had resisted joining the Common App. They're on the Common App. Some other big ones, Wichita State came on. And then here's another huge one, the University of South Carolina, which is the flagship for South Carolina. They came on the Common App this year. College of Charleston came on. University of Texas at Arlington, University of Texas at Dallas, Hampton University, Anika, another big one. One of the leading HBCUs in the country. They were not Common App last year. They're now Common App. University of Charleston, another well-known school. And then the University of Utah, once again, flagship for the state of Utah. So a lot of pretty prominent national schools. And then also internationally, the Common App had schools join this year in Wales and Japan, multiple schools in England, and then Ryerson University in Ontario, Canada. So huge year for them adding a lot of schools. So those are the things that some of the main changes to me that are in this year's Common App. What are you thinking?
Well, I say let's buckle down and get her done.
I mean, I personally love it. I'm very biased. And a college counselor, I love the functionality of it. It makes my life really easy. And I think it makes life, what the Common App does, it does something that I always try to do in every one of my business endeavors, which is come up with a win-win for everybody. Right? Like what's going to be a win for the student, a win for the parent, a win for the school, and it's a win for me. And I feel like that's what the Common App's done. Like, it's great for students, it's great for colleges, and it's great for college coaches like myself who, have everything at our disposal and can see a lot and can help kids a lot. So I'm a big fan. Now, I will say this. There was a time, Anika, when the Common App had a lot stricter standards around certain things. Like not that they've lowered their standards, but you can be a Common App school right now and not require an essay. You can be a Common App school and not require teacher recommendations. The Common App used to be a lot stricter about some of those things. It used to be a lot stricter that we are for schools that truly do holistic evaluation. And they are broadening their tent to allow schools that do a lot more admissions by the numbers. But it's just helpful to have one platform, in my opinion, that it just makes it really, really easy for everybody. So I'm a fan. Any other thoughts?
Well, actually, Janae's counselor, she clarified that with me recently because I was like, wait, this school isn't asking for all of this stuff. So why would we go through that Common App for that? And she said just what you said, is you don't have to do it. So that, that spoke to the leniency that they have now for some of them. So that's great. Awesomeness.
But I'm going to give an admissions tip. Just because a college does not require a personal statement, it doesn't mean they won't read it if you submit it.
Good to know.
All right, Anika, are we ready for my intro for Peter Van Buskirk? Part 2. Remember, I couldn't help myself last week. So this is, in my opinion, going to be one of these can't miss interviews. Peter starts out, he shares his background, how he got into admissions, the different roles he's had. And he talks about his 40-year career and the different roles he served in those 40 years. And then I introduce our topic, which is things colleges do as a business that are not in the best interest of you, the student, or you, the parent. In part 1, Peter will also talk about college rankings and when they came in and how they changed college admissions. Peter has a great perspective, Anika, because he did college admissions before U.S. News came into play. So he can talk about what it was like before U.S. News was around and after U.S. News. And he talks about that in this interview. And then he talks about how colleges manipulate their selectivity. And then he also talks about what he calls the doors of enrollment. And finally, we talk about VIP apps. So a lot of content jammed into the next 20 minutes. So listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
I'm here with Peter Van Buskirk. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Peter.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be with you.
Friends, you are in for a treat today. We have one of the true giants in the admissions world with over 4 decades of experience. And Peter, I don't know if I ever told you this, but you did a junior parent workshop back at Westtown School. Do you remember doing that?
I do. It's been about half a dozen or so years now.
Well, I was talking to Susan Tree recently, and she said you were the best speaker that she ever brought in her 27 years. So I never told you that.
Well, that's quite a nice compliment. Susan's one of the best out there in terms of college advisors, and to get that feedback from her makes my heart warm.
Yeah, she's been on our podcast before as well. So, and this is some stuff you may not know, but I started reading your admissions blog some time ago, and I thought it was insightful, a blog as I found anywhere. And then I bought your book, Winning the College Admissions Game, and More Pearls of Wisdom. So when you and I met in New Orleans at a SACAC conference in 2018, I knew this was not going to be a 5-minute conversation.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't. And so we talked, and then we saw each other again in Atlanta, 2019, had a nice dinner, realized we had a lot in common, and presto, you're here. So why don't you take a a few minutes. Tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got involved in admissions, and why don't you lead us right up to your time as an admissions dean when you ended there?
Well, thank you. It's interesting. I think a lot of people get into college admission sort of through the back door. They graduate from college and maybe they were tour guides at their alma maters, and they decide, well, I don't know what else to do, so I'll go into college admission until I figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life. And my backstory is actually kind of interesting that way, because I went to college expecting to become a lawyer, and as was the case for many kids, that whole idea went poof in the middle of my sophomore year. And so I was involved with the social sciences and sociology in particular, did some work with demographics. And at the time, I really didn't have a full appreciation for how it would play out. But in my junior and senior years, I was an undergraduate at Bucknell, had an opportunity to work in the admission office. But the summer between my junior and senior year, I was working in the admission office as the only intern that summer. I was the only one giving tours, 5 a day. And when there weren't tours to be given, I was doing the analysis of the attitude and opinion surveys. So when students are accepted, most institutions will send out a survey to those who are coming and those who aren't coming, asking about their choice process. Now, this was in the days before computers, so I did this by chicken scratch on legal pads, but it was a fascinating way for me to apply what I thought I was learning in the classroom. And the connection started at that point. So as I was finishing Bucknell, I became very interested in pursuing admission possibilities. And actually, my first opportunity was at Juniata College, a great little liberal arts college in central Pennsylvania, where I was hired as admission counselor and assistant director of public relations. They needed to fill 2 slots, and so I was the sports information director also. That lasted for a year, and I moved then exclusively into admission for my second year. My Juniata experience was formative, though, because this was in the late 1970s when there was an attitude about the college-going process that sounded like if you build it, they will come. In other words, colleges and universities were seemingly overrun with lots of talented students, and they kept building, expanding. It seemed like the riches would never end in terms of the opportunities in higher education. However, the school for which I worked, Juniata, was struggling. And at that time, the president had decided to bring in a consultant to work with the admission operation, which was unheard of at the time, but it became fascinating for me. It was like having an MBA in college admission during my first job experience, and learning about prospect management and regional segmentation and all kinds of things. So that I was there for 2 years, and it really whetted my appetite for the work. After my second year, I had the opportunity to move to Franklin and Marshall into an assistant director position. And quite frankly, Mark, for the next 24 years and almost 25 years, I had regular opportunities every 3 or 4 years through promotion to move up through the ranks. And I became the director in 1988, the dean in 1993, associate vice president for enrollment management in 1998. And by the way, I was also the athletic director in there for a year and a half. So it was quite an experience. But my career path paralleled the morphing of institutional life, colleges and universities, into businesses. We went from being gatekeepers in the early 1980s, people who would read applications and simply decide whom to admit, to being strategic enrollment managers. And so it was that experience that I think enlightened me with regard to what the public needed to see. As colleges and universities changed their approach to recruitment, the rhetoric didn't change. In other words, and it's still the case, if you were to listen to a lot of people talk, admission officers talk about college admission, you hear them talk as though they're speaking to you in the 1980s rather than in the late 2000 and what is it now, not 2019. And so much has changed in the whole process and in the whole marketing and the whole transactional nature of what we do. And what I decided to do upon leaving Franklin and Marshall was to become a student advocate. Do presentations at schools like Westtown for students and parents, give them a better sense of what they were about to encounter in the college admission process, and better yet, how they could prepare. My objective, quite simply, is to help inform students so they can make good choices. I don't care where they go to college. I'm not somebody who's hell-bent on getting X number of kids into Ivy League institutions because, frankly, I don't believe that that's the best destination for a lot of kids. But I focus on fit. I've spent a lot of time talking about fit and helping students to reflect on who they are, why they want to go to college. When we are student-centered in the process, we make better decisions. So that's really been at the core of the work I've done for the last dozen or so years. I had an opportunity along the way to work for Peterson's Guides. They hired me to do the speaking and the consulting that I do normally, but under their banner. And more recently, I've had an opportunity to work with Revolution Prep doing the same thing. But my business, The Best College Fit, is the name of the business that I created, is one that continues to function.
It's amazing. I have literally yet to meet my first middle school student or high school student who tells me I want to grow up and be an admissions officer or counselor. And literally everyone who does this stumbles into it, maybe similar to you, maybe volunteering on a college campus. But I don't know if you have, but it's a fascinating career and an incredibly rewarding career, but it's definitely not one that people are growing up at the age of 5, 7, 12, and 15 saying that's what I want to do with my life.
No. No. Well, and again, I think that a lot of people see it as a placeholder career. But if you throw yourself at the work, and I think that's probably what I did, you really can get inside of the process and understand that it's really about working with people, helping people make good decisions and affecting positive outcomes. And the more you do that, the more rewarding the outcomes are for you as a person as well.
Well, when I think of you, Peter, I think of two things: student-centered, which is interesting because you chose that word, and then you're a truth teller. You shoot straight. And I think that you do a good job of peeling back the onion and kind of letting people know exactly what's really going on here. And that's actually a good segue to our topic for the day, which is things colleges do as businesses that are not necessarily in your best interest as a student.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
While I talked about the changes for the Common App in our bonus section this week, I didn't cover all of the changes, so here are 2 more. The Common App has expanded its college profile pages. This is now one of the best places to go when you want to research a college. Colleges can now showcase their academic culture, their academic programs, and their student life sections with much more detail than ever before. And you will also see so many more virtual tours. And our regular listeners know, I'm a huge fan of virtual college tours. Now, here's a new fun change. When you submit your official application through the Common App, all of a sudden confetti comes flying down everywhere on the screen, celebrating your accomplishment. And it will do that for every college. If you really want to learn about even more changes to the new Common App than what I discussed in our bonus section, or the 2 I just mentioned here, check out the webinar, What is New for the Common App in 2019-20. And that is our recommended resource for week 90. Anika and I will put the link in the show notes for you to watch this 27-minute webinar. Why don't we kick that off? And why don't we start by talking about some of the things colleges do to appear to make themselves seem more selective to drive down their acceptance rate? Anything you want to share in that area?
Well, sure. And I want to preface my remark by saying that one of the things that really accelerated the consumerism that we see now in the college going process was the advent of college rankings in 1983. Presumption was that U.S. News and World Report could collect and present data in such a way that they could quantify the mythical pecking order of colleges. And frankly, over the last 30 years, most of what they offer has been debunked. And the ranking guides, if any of your listeners have them, should be good fire starters. They're really they're fiction, they're not fact. But one of the things that came out of the rankings was an attempt to show a sense of the selectivity, and the presumption is the harder it is to get in, the better they must be. It's really bad logic, but over time, selectivity became the proxy for quality because there really hasn't been a good metric that's developed to allow anyone to compare institutions qualitatively. So now it must be selectivity. They admit 5%, they must be really, really good. They admit 10%, well, they're good, but not that good. They admit 50%, okay, they're okay. And again, the logic is terrible because there's wonderful quality to be found in many institutions, but regardless of selectivity. But to your question, what do colleges do to impact selectivity? They really focus on selectivity in 2 ways. One, you can become more selective by increasing the number of students who apply, not because you want to admit them, but so that you can turn down more. And the second thing you can do is reduce the number of students who are admitted. And that's where colleges have become pretty cagey in the last 15 to 20 years as well. But in terms of generating more applications, well, back in the 1980s, this started with a lot of search mailings, a lot of college fairs, college nights. Colleges started to market directly to kids. And as soon as a student takes an SAT, PSAT, ACT, AP test, colleges are buying the names of these kids by the hundreds of thousands. And I think that's what's not necessarily understood by families, because when a kid gets a really nice glossy pamphlet in the mail or gets some really interesting email communication from a college or university that's highly personalized for the young person, they think, wow, they want me. I'm going to get a scholarship at this place. This is going to be good. And the reality is that those schools don't even know you. They know enough about you to know that you probably could be competitive if they decided to admit you, but they haven't decided to admit you. They want you to apply, so then they can decide whether they want you. And I think that it's a little disingenuous the way that the process works. But what we need to do is help families understand that the colleges are operating in sales mode right up until the point when the students make the final decision to enroll. So if you think about colleges as selling, even though they might be doing it somewhat discreetly, that's what they're doing all the time to generate more applications and generate more student interest. How do they reduce the number of admitted applications? I've developed, and I think you've seen this, Mark, in my presentations, I developed a graphic that illustrates this. I call it the doors of enrollment. And the colleges and universities that can be at all selective, meaning that they have to choose between really good candidates, will segment their selection processes. So they start with perhaps early decision or early action. Then they have a regular admission process, and then they maintain a wait list in the event that students who have been admitted through regular early decision, if that number of offers of admission doesn't yield what they want in terms of the class, they go to the wait list. And then there's another category. Well, I'll try to do this as simply as I can without any kind of graphic right now. But typically, the yield on offers of admission for regular candidates, students who are not asking for any early consideration, the typical yield is lower. And with the exception of the most selective schools in the country, the yield is probably about 20% or lower on offers of admission in the regular process. At those most selective schools, the yield could be higher, could be 30 or 40%.
And let's break that down, Peter. So basically that means that schools are getting 1 out of every 5 kids that they admit, right?
Exactly. Thank you. That's the ratio. Now, contrast that with a typical early decision yield. With early decision, the student is making the commitment to enroll if accepted. So theoretically, that should be a 100% yield. You admit 1 to get 1 versus admit 5 to get 1. You don't have to look at those numbers too closely to realize the preference here is to drive as many kids through early decision as possible. Because, well, for example, let's suppose an institution that has a 20% yield on regular decision, let's suppose they decide to increase the number of early decision enrollments by 50 over the previous year. And let's suppose they're successful. Now going into the regular admission process, they have reduced by 250 the number of students they need to admit in regular decision to fill the same number of spots.
Yeah, and this isn't theoretical. I mean, this happens all the time. I was just looking at Colorado College, an early decision acceptance rate slightly under 30, a regular decision acceptance rate of 5%. So they're taking 1 in 20 kids, right? And therefore driving down their acceptance rate. But here's the part that's so dangerous to me about this, Peter, is that it seems like when colleges do this, it can have the impact on their reputation out there that they want it to have. I mean, I'm thinking of 2 students I worked with this year. One student was down to Emory and Pomona, and he was like, Mark, Pomona sent me something saying their acceptance rate was 6.8 something, 4.87% this year. He's like, I feel so honored to be one of those ones. And I had another student that was trying to decide between Boston University and Babson. They went to the presentation and they said, for business students, the acceptance rate was 14%. And they're telling me, I feel so honored. And so it feels like as a strategy, it sometimes can accomplish what the colleges are trying to do with it.
Well, sure. I mean, as I said before, they're trying to convey the notion that selectivity is a proxy for quality. I'm so honored. It must be the best school. And when they're making that statement, is they're losing track of why they're going to college.
Mm-hmm.
They're succumbing to the notion of the honor rather than the notion of the fit.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing that I don't think the public realizes, though, is how much manipulation can occur behind the scenes to get those numbers, right? Like, I mean, like well, you've given one example, increase your early decision acceptance rate, meaning less spots, lower. I don't remember this when I started doing this, but these Snap apps, VIP apps that everybody gets blitzed with. Why don't you talk to our audience about what they are and how they can impact this?
Well, the Snap apps, the VIP apps, probably starting sometime in July or August of this summer prior to the senior year, colleges will start to send out these very encouraging communication to students saying, we've identified you as a VIP candidate for us. If you apply by September 1st, September 15th, whatever, we'll guarantee admission and there'll be X amount of dollars in financial aid, et cetera, or we'll give you preference in housing. It's not even early decision. It's a different kind of application process. And again, their objective is to get as many kids to commit on a one-to-one basis, admit one, get one basis as they can. And so they're pushing their selectivity to a lower number.
But I find those are effective. Like every year I'll have students say, Mark, I've got this thing in the mail. They're waiving my app fee. They're telling me I'm one of the top special applicants in their whole applicant pool. They're saying that I don't have to do essays. I just have to do this, that, the other. And they're telling me I'm immediately eligible for a $20,000 merit scholarship. Like, I really like what I'm seeing here. So there's the cleverness of the marketing driving applications, people feeling special on one end, but sure, sometimes they're trying to identify diamonds in the rough. We can't dismiss that. But sometimes the bigger goal is to be able to say I have more applications and my acceptance rate's even lower, right?
Well, sure. But what happens then is students are drawn into situations where they make bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And whenever you're given an opportunity to win something, to get something free, when you don't have to pay anything back, there's always a temptation to feel like I can't afford not to do this, rather than how does this really fit with what I want to accomplish? And my advice to students is to stay focused on the priorities that they have going in and not to allow the marketing that they get from colleges to distract them, because that's how kids can be drawn away from decision-making or a logical decision-making process that would land them at places that make sense. They may end up at those places anyhow, but the process becomes a lot more tortured.
All right, next week we've got breaking news 2 weeks in a row, and this time it's entitled, Welcome to the Wild West. The competition for applicants has just intensified. And we'll be in chapter 91 of 171 answers, and we're explaining why there is so much buzz about the new Coalition for College. And next week's question is from a mom of a charter school student where the school doesn't have traditional AP and IP courses. And she wants to know if and how admissions officers will interpret the classes as being equivalent to AP and IB. And Mark continues his interview with Mr. Peter Van Buskirk and understanding how colleges act as businesses in ways that are not in your best interest, part 2.
Friends, you are not going to want to miss our breaking news segment. That broke right around the same time the affirmative action decision broke. And this is actually even a bigger story, really, because the ruling by the local judge in Massachusetts, we know it's still got to go through a couple more iterations, but we're going to talk about some major changes that went down at the NACAC conference this year that govern and guide how colleges can recruit students. And it's about to be the wild, wild west out here. And we're going to break it down for you next week. So you're going to want to hear that breaking news segment. Now, for our college spotlight of the week, Anika, I could give you 1,000 guesses. And you would not guess the school I'm picking this time. I guarantee it.
North Carolina AP State University?
Good shot. Good try. So this week, our college spotlight, episode 90, is for someone who wants to do something different and adventuresome. We are profiling Hawaii Pacific University.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah. Also known as HPU. So Hawaii Pacific University, located in Honolulu, and there are 8 major islands in Hawaii, but Oahu is the island that HPU is on. And really what that means is Oahu means gathering place. So it's in the Waikiki area. And, when you're at Hawaii Pacific, you'll notice there's a huge tower. It's called the Aloha Tower, and it's a very much a celebrated landmark in Honolulu. It's basically like their Statue of Liberty, welcoming people to Hawaii. And so they're located on Aloha Drive, right by the tower. A little bit about HPU, 3,545 undergraduates, about 3,500, a little more than 3,500 undergrads, another 600 graduate students. So a little bit more than 4,000. Now, they also have an extension online school. If you count that, they're really around 4,900. But really, in terms of people there on campus, 3,500 plus undergrads, another 600 grad students. Co-ed school, 70% acceptance rate. So right around the national average. We've said before. Do you remember what we said the national average was, Anika? For acceptance? 67. So two out of...
Oh, darn, I did remember that. Darn it.
Yeah. So two out of... because that was last week. 2 out of every 3 people get in nationally. So they're right around the national average, 70%. The average GPA is a 3.4. But remember, this is so important. I can't say it enough. Averages are not cutoffs. Averages are not cutoffs. So if you have a 2.8 grade point average and around a 950 to 1,000 SAT or an 18 to a 20 ACT, then you're likely to be admitted. Okay. And if your numbers are a little higher than that, you're likely to automatically get a scholarship. Not a big one, but you're still getting free money. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a feel for the selectivity. However, the number one thing they look for, and I met with Chris, who I really like. He's from Virginia. He represents the school extremely well. He was very transparent in my session with him. And he said, the number one thing we're looking for is self-motivation. That's it. Self-motivation. Because we need somebody that can move across the world, basically, and has independence. So that's what they are looking for. Although, you still need to basically have that 2.8 and that test score. But if you've got that motivation, then they're going to be extremely interested. Here's one thing that's really cool. Do you know, this won't surprise you because it's Hawaii, Nika, but they have a waterfront location right on the water. Yes, they do. You are on the water. Pretty cool. And, as Chris said, he said, what he said? He said, people save up their whole lives to go to Hawaii for a week. How about coming here for 4 years?
Right.
And he's from Virginia. He's from Virginia. He came over from 2015 and he's like, I'm living the life here. I'm just going to let you know I'm living the dream. So a few more things. Small class is very rarely we find a class over 40 there. Average class size is 17. So according to Chris, they are the most diverse private college in the U.S.
Oh, really?
If they're not, I know University of San Francisco is up there. There's some of the CUNY schools are up there. But here's some of the racial demographic breakdown. 25% white, 19% biracial, 16% Latinx, 17% Black, 2% Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, 10% international. So as far as racial diversity, that's quite a mix.
That sounds pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he broke down the history of Hawaii, this amalgamation of all these Asian cultures. So he broke down how that Asian percentage is like all these, a multiplicity of different Asian cultures in there, which is pretty fascinating. So 60% of the students are women and 60% are from Hawaii, 40% not from Hawaii as far as who's at the school. So there's a little breakdown there. Most of the students live in apartment-style waterfront housing as freshmen. Larger, though. A lot of them are like 4 people staying in like a bigger apartment. One thing that I wish they had more of, and I'm going to try to be a little bit more nuanced in my reviews. I think I've been overly effusive. I'm going to try to also present, maybe something that they could do a little better moving forward, in my opinion. They are a bit of a commuter school. So right now, 1 in 7 students are staying on campus. So of the 3,500 undergrads, like 500 would be living on campus, and then 3,000 would be, interspersed in Honolulu.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Hawaii, you have to learn Hawaii there. At least you have to take a Hawaiian language class, at least one class, which is interesting. Lots of nightlife in Honolulu that they're tied into. And even that Hawaii is extremely expensive, their cost of attendance is in the high 40s. So
I was just about to ask that because I've never been, but I heard it's like, I've heard of that. Yeah.
One thing that's so cool when you stay in education, you can get some nice little perks. I've been to Hawaii twice In both
Did you
cases,
visit this school? You visited this
I
school?
did not visit HPU, but twice I went for conferences, for educational conferences. And I was loving it there. I really loved Hawaii. It was really, my only thing about Hawaii is that it's basically a 12-hour flight, and if I'm going to fly for 12 hours, I got to be there a little while. Cause that's like, by the time you drive to the airport, get to your gate early, that's like a 15-hour day. You know what I mean? And if I'm going to do that, like there and back, like I said, next time I go to Hawaii, I got to at least be there a week, and really probably 10 days to 2 weeks.
Or 4 years. One of the two.
There you go. I wish their endowment was bigger. It's at $44 million, which is like less than half of the boarding school I worked at, which is at 400 kids. But that means they're mostly tuition driven. But some really, really cool things I'll mention. By the way, 60% of students that graduate, Anika, will use the term go back to the mainland. So come over to what we think of as the contiguous 48 states. So 40% stay in Hawaii and 60% come back over here. When I'm meeting with admissions counselors, I always like to ask them the question, what are your strongest programs? Not your most enrolled, because a lot of times the most enrolled are always going to be certain programs, right? Like business, psychology, but right? I say, what are your strongest programs? This is my term. What are your signature programs? I like to ask them that. And so I asked Chris that, and he said, biology, health sciences. He said there's incredible demand right now in Hawaii for clinical and mental health professionals. So biology says lots of one thing I didn't say, everybody at HPU gets an internship. That is so cool. Every single student gets an internship.
You mean like 100% everybody?
Oh, yep. Everybody gets an internship. Yep. Everybody gets an internship. So I have to get that in there. So biology is the number one. This won't surprise you. Marine biology, right? Right. Yeah. Marine biology is one of the strongest programs. Oceanography is one of their strongest programs. They have this great Oceanic Institute. It's actually on a separate campus. It's not on the main campus. And you study things like coral reefs, turtles, sharks. You do research, so if that's your thing, like it's a great place to go. This won't surprise you. And this is a school being really smart. Like use your location. Hospitality and tourism is one of their strongest majors, right? Like how can you not, when you're in Hawaii, have that as a strong major? And they have incredible internships in Hawaii in that department. Their School of Business and Marketing, that's definitely a strength. They have this really unique program that combines the arts and marketing called Arts and Business. And nursing is really, really, really popular. That was their first program to ever offer a doctorate. So you can get your doctorate in nursing there as well as your master's. So they have a very strong nursing. And I actually looked at how many people are graduating in different fields, and they're kicking out a lot of nurses. And then the last programs that I would highlight as strengths would be international studies, computer science, and environmental science. So I have to, and I'm going to butcher it because I am, but I'm going to butcher it anyway. I learned this from Chris. I have to close by saying Malahu, which means thank you, and aloha, goodbye. I think I got the aloha right.
Wait.
Forgive me, Hawaiians, if I messed up on the Malahu, but that's what he said.
Aloha means goodbye? I thought that meant hello.
Oh, he messed up on that too.
I could be totally wrong, but I'm just okay. Sorry, Hawaii.
I'm the one who's been there twice. I'm the one who's supposed to know this stuff.
Hello, Mark. You are the expert.
No, I'm not. I'm the expert who makes lots of mistakes. But what did you think about HPU, Anika? What were your thoughts?
Well, I was like itching to see where the job market was for oceanography. And so I just put up the Occupational Outlook Handbook.
Oh, that's your favorite thing.
Yeah, their median pay in 2018 was $91,130 per year.
Uh-oh, you know what that means? You know what that means?
What?
Anika, it's going to mean, Janaea, I got a new idea for you. Like, let's punt this veterinarian plan. No? Oh, John. You're going for John. Okay.
John's the victim right now.
Okay, John. Okay.
About to take him to the ocean.
There you go. Take him to the ocean. He may end up at HPU. All because of this podcast. And guess what? He'll be getting some visits from his mom and dad.
That is for sure.
By the way, aloha can mean hello or goodbye.
Oh, okay.
Either one. Yeah. Oh, by the way, they have this really cool tradition in Hawaii. I don't know if you know, but when women meet each other, they kind of like touch cheeks on the left side and the right side. It's not like guys don't do it, but like ladies do it. It's just really cool. So you see a lot of that going on there. But anyway, any other thoughts besides the oceanography gig for John?
Big takeaway. No, I think that's first of all, who knew going to Hawaii for college? So that's the thing. And yes, that sounds awesome. And that diversity, that's striking. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, how transformative would that be in your life to spend 4 years there? Like that would be, especially I've been there twice, and I'm telling you, this place, Hawaii, is very, 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 very nice. Right. Very nice. It lives up to its rep. Trust me.
Let me get a weekend, please.
Only thing I'll tell you is bring your wallet.
Right. Yes, maybe that's why I have not been yet.
I have to tell you this story quickly, Anika. Mm-hmm. So I originally, and I felt so bad about this. But I had originally told Joy when she graduated from high school, I was going to give her and her sister for graduation present a trip to Hawaii. Okay. For graduating from high school.
Oh, high school.
Yeah. So then I started looking at how much it was going to cost me, you know, and I came crawling back. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but is San Antonio going to be okay? So they flew to San Antonio. And you know, I've got a couple timeshares, you know that. And now that Karis is 21, she can go without me being there. So that was their first time that they ever did a timeshare without like adults, without my wife and I present. And they like did the river walk and they went out and ate at nice restaurants and they did all that stuff. And it still was like a fraction of what Hawaii would have cost me. But so there's a lesson. Before you go promising your kids something, check how much it's going to cost you.
Well, and you still got honeymoons coming up. They're going to get married possibly one day. So you can start saving up now for it, Mark, for the Hawaii.
Don't listen to this podcast, Karis and Joy. I'm still stunned. I still have like aftershock effects from like that. Like that trip was that was getting up there so high. Cause you know, I mean, it's not just airfare, like airfare is $2,000. You know, but then just your hotels, meals, everything. It was
meals, I can imagine the meals.
Oh, they're so expensive. You look up because so much stuff has to be imported from off, right? So, like, look up the cost of milk in Hawaii. Just look it up. You'll see juice. Wow. You know, it's like okay, but it's all good. It's good. This is fun. I enjoyed it. What do you got going on this weekend?
You mean this week, Mark? We got a week coming up.
We do.
Lots and lots of work, as always.
Well, this is not this week, but next week I will be flying to Philadelphia, going back to Westtown for 3-4 days. Anika, big college fair.
Oh, your fair is coming up. That's right.
And you know what? Janae should be at that fair. I mean, it's for people all over the country.
You're
so
right.
you got to get the word out.
The price of milk in Hawaii is $9.
See, you looked it up. Good old Google. You feel like dropping $9 for some milk? I told you, I'm not playing.
Let me stop, HPU. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sure you.
Well, you know, one of the points Chris actually made is, you know, that's all subsidized. You know what he said? He said, is Hawaii expensive? Absolutely. But what a lot of people don't realize is everybody gets off on the tourists. Like the tourist, you know, bears the brunt of everything, but the local residents don't have it anywhere near the same way. So,
good to know. Thanks for clarifying.
I mean, you're talking about a school that has a cost under $50,000, and they also have scholarships on top of that, and it's a private school.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we'll see you next week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.